To be completely honest, this is something I've wanted to talk about for a while, so I decided to just write up a rant for a video and record. As some of you may or may not know, aside from being a big Deltarune and Undertale fan, I am also a Zelda fan. The franchise holds a special place in my heart. When I was probably between 12 to 13, we found my dad's old N64 in the attic one day while doing some cleaning. It was then that I learned that he used to play video games in college before he eventually became interested in cars and moved on to other things. Anyway, he lent it to me at that age. I remember it took me a few hours to figure out how to set it up with the wires the first few times, but as soon as I figured it out, I went straight for Ocarina of Time. The first Zelda game I played was actually The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which introduced me to the Zelda franchise. I played it because my older brother played it when we first got a Nintendo Switch, so I tried it out and eventually became fascinated with Zelda games and wanted to play all of the 3D ones. But today I'm only here to talk about the Hero of Time, so I will only be covering two games. The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, and The Legend of Zelda, Majora's Mask. I'm limiting it to those two because if I don't, I would start ranting about every single Zelda game's timeline and how they're all interconnected in a distant way. I will also say a lot of Zelda fans will tell you that these two games are the most overglazed games in the entire franchise. To which I will reply, you're right. But also I don't care. I like almost every Zelda game anyway. The 3D ones are just my favorite, which does include Skyward Sword and Wind Waker too. By the way, fair warning, I decided to start by just talking about why I love this game, so prepare for some yap. I remember when I started Ocarina of Time, because between the ages of probably 13 to 14, I grinded that game, which is a fancy way of saying I was terrible at it. And it took me many days. I'd often stay up past when I was supposed to and sneak the game late at night. The art style and the areas in the world always captivated me at a young age. Now, I will also say that admittedly, the first time I played Ocarina of Time as a child, I got all the way to the Gerudo Fortress, and I ended up rage quitting the game because I somehow managed to accidentally delete my save file, I think, when I was on a beach trip or something. Like, we were at a condo, and I didn't understand that while the display screen wasn't on, the console was still on. I was just button mashing as a child, and then I got home and figured out I somehow managed to delete my save. So I quit the game for years, and then I eventually came back to it when I was 17 or 18, but that's an unrelated side rant. Anyway, the music in Ocarina of Time was just on another level for me. The note patterns are memorable in a way I can't really begin to describe. Even years later, I'm still convinced I could learn some of the songs on piano by memorization of the sound alone. And I don't even know how to read sheet music. Should probably take the time to learn though. Well, mega rant aside, let's get to the point of this video. What I wanted to talk about today was the Hero of Time. For people who have played Zelda, there are many different iterations of Link, because Link and Zelda are reincarnated for reasons that happened in another Zelda game called Skyward Sword. While I won't go into the specifics, more or less, every single Link and Zelda in each game is from a distinct and distant timeline, their own version of Hyrule, yet all the timelines are connected. Every single Link and Zelda is their own person in each game, with their own motivations and differences throughout each installment in the franchise. That yap aside, the Hero of Time version of Link is my favorite installment. Mostly because, of all the Links, he's the most tragic to me, I guess. I mean, don't get me wrong, every single Link has to face tragedy and losing people in their story to some extent, but the Hero of Time is just on another level in my opinion. One thing I've always loved about Link is that he isn't mute as a result of some sort of condition or anything. In most games he can talk, he just chooses not to very often. I always found that kind of silence interesting, heavy, and in some ways makes you reflect on yourself. Part of why I love the character. It may also be because part of me relates to that stone face he has throughout the games as someone on the spectrum. I'm going to try and give just an abridged summary of everything the Hero of Time has to go through, I guess. I could explain the entire plot of this game, but that would take even longer, so I'll be as brief as I can and just focus on Link's role in the story. I may skip some parts due to just simply how massive of a game Ocarina of Time is. The Hero of Time's story begins with, based on what we know from both theories and allegedly some old Nintendo Power magazines and also cutscene stuff, the Great Hyrule War, which was many, many years long, and not much information is given about it other than that. Now, during the Great Hyrule War, a Hyrulean mother was allegedly injured and fled into the forest with her child. In that forest, the Lost Woods as the game calls it, she gives her child, Link, to the Great Deku Tree and the Forest Children shortly before she passes away. Link is raised among the Kokiri, which is essentially a species of forest children that don't age at all. Link is raised to believe he's a Kokiri until he's about 10 years old. I'm not exactly 100% sure about Link's canonic age in this game, but I'm gonna say 10 is probably a good guess and close anyway. Many of the other Kokiri by this point also don't know that Link isn't a Kokiri since he was raised with them. Only the Great Deku Tree does. After defeating the first dungeon in the game, the Great Deku Tree tells Link about both his role as the hero of time and the great evil that is coming, and the power he needs to banish it. That he is also not a Kokiri, but a Hylian. From there, the Great Deku Tree dies from the sickness that afflicted him shortly after. Now, you can plant a baby Great Deku Tree later in the game as an adult, but that doesn't change the fact that the original is gone. Also, the baby does become the Great Deku Tree in Wind Waker. That is confirmed, but that's unrelated. So, bro lost a father figure. Already off to a great start. Oh yeah, I also forgot to mention that in the main plot, one of the Kokiri girls he grows up with is named Saria, and she's his childhood best friend. That will be important later, but I'll get to that. When Link leaves the forest to save Hyrule, he ends up having to leave Saria behind. Of course, that isn't before she teaches him her song, which is also the area theme for the Lost Woods. Now, this is where I'll get abridged, and I'll start skipping some stuff, so... Basically, the Zelda in this timeline does care about Link, but if she does harbor any feelings for him at all, it isn't obvious to me, and she never really acted like it. She definitely cares, though, don't get me wrong, which I always found interesting, and I felt like it made the game more intriguing, since Zelda suddenly wasn't Link's main love interest, which is usually the case for him. Now, Link ends up having to travel across Hyrule at around 10 years old, mind you, to collect 3 different thingies. Yes, that's right. You heard me. 3 different thingies. Gotta love those thingies that you need to do the thingy. Basically, he gets one thingy from a Goron chief guy after helping him get his bros food by also killing the last dinosaur. He also gets a thingy from a Zora King's daughter, or the princess of the Zora, Princess Rudo. For saving her in the dungeon, she gives it to him. The only thing is, apparently she says it's an engagement ring that her father said to give to the boy she would marry? So yeah, this guy's 10 years old running around, probably doesn't even know what marriage or an engagement ring is, and is now the fiance of this little girl who definitely expects a full commitment. But hey, he got the engagement, that thingy he needed. Anyway, the final thingy he needed was actually what he got from the first dungeon, which was when the tree guy was sick and we had to kill a monster in him or something. So yeah, we already got that thingy at this point. Now that Link has all the thingies, he can get his apple juice and run to the Master Sword in the Temple of Time and unlock the door with his thingies. Then he grabs the sword, but apparently, no! It can't be that easy, because everything has to be hard! Have you ever wanted to skip childhood? Have you ever wanted to just be like, heh, being a kid, screw that? Well, unfortunately, that's exactly what happens to Link. Since he isn't old enough to wield the Master Sword, he naps for 7 years trapped in another world, basically while Ganon takes over until he grows into an adult. Stinking idiot Hyrule gods had to trap us in a stasis dimension for 7 years! Anyway, when Link wakes up, Hyrule is now taken over by Ganon, and to make matters worse, a bunch of these new temples we learn about as an adult, which contain even more thingies which we need to defeat Ganon, are now infested with monsters. Each temple is tied to one of the 7 sages, who, as it turns out, 2 of the 7 sages are Link's childhood best friend Saria. See? See? You see?
You see? Well, you don't see it?
Told you that was gonna come up later. Oh yeah, also, Ganon's Spanish and from the desert because of this game, so we're switching to this song now. Anyway, back to the video. Yeah. And Princess Rudo, is also one of the sages as well. So, you know, the little, fish girl Link was engaged to at 10 years old. Yeah, her. Man, wording it this way really makes the plot sound crazy, huh? I probably sound like a lunatic right now. Anyway, you got the Sage of Light, Sage of Forest, Sage of Water, Sage of Fire, Sage of Shadow, other sages which I could go over, but I'm keeping this bridge because the focus is trauma. So all the sages end up being trapped in their respective temples by Ganon, except honestly I think it's much worse than that. While it isn't directly stated in game, it is very much implied that all of the sages were killed in their temples by the bosses that Ganon put there, which is why we can't find them in the temple until the end after we beat the temple boss, and suddenly they're just in the sacred realm. This particularly hits hard when you realize Saria was killed, which, by the way, we later learned as an adult through hints from another Kokiri named Mido, who was like Link's childhood bully. Saria probably had feelings for Link. So yeah, childhood best friend was also childhood crush. And yeah, sure, that never would have worked anyway, because Link's a Hylian, so he ages, and Saria doesn't. But that doesn't change the fact that that's just another one for the trauma score. Ding ding. Oh yeah, and other random girl character that isn't really central to the plot is Malone, who is a ranch girl who gives Link her horse, Epona. She has this memorable song her mother taught her before she died and is a nice character. That one character is probably the only character Link meets as a child that he cares about and lives in the adult timeline. And sure, I guess you could say Zelda lived in the adult timeline too, but she's disguised as some guy called Sheik, so... Anyway, long story short, Guy learns time travel at the cost of everyone he cares about. Ultimately, Link gets help by the sages, yes, but the way we only see them in that realm and Ghost overlooking everyone else in the credits really tells me the sages are dead. So yeah, the hero of time loses most of the people close to him. The time travel element and how it changes the world around him is also really interesting when combined with memorable music and creepy sections in this game. Creepy, well. Anyway, also just love the way music plays a central part in the story with the playing the ocarina mechanic and the songs being magic. Now, when Link does eventually save Hyrule from Ganon in the adult timeline, Zelda feels bad for Link missing out on his childhood and blames herself for it. But instead of thinking realistically, she does what is, in my opinion, the stupidest thing she could do in the Zelda timeline. She creates a permanent timeline split the entire franchise by sending adult Link back to his child timeline. Look, I know the sentiment is she wanted him to be able to experience his childhood, but like, come on. She screwed Hyrule over in one timeline, giving Ganon a timeline where he can return, and there's no Link to save Hyrule until a new one is born, which is the reason Wind Waker exists, by the way, because the gods had to flood Hyrule because of Zelda's mistake. Oh, and other great idea. Remember that child that was forced to grow into an adult and go on massive adventures and has basically saved an entire nation and experienced things that clearly shaped him into an adult and trauma that no child should ever witness? Let's just throw that full-grown man with trauma back into a child's body so he can be in a timeline where some of his friends are still alive. That won't cause any existential problems at all. That's a great idea, Zelda. Thank you. That was genius, really. Great sentiment. Not at all selfish. Anyway, ultimately, this creates two separate timelines, as I stated. The child timeline and the adult timeline. One is a timeline where Child Link, the hero of time, who was an adult that saved Hyrule, was placed back into a child's body and placed in a timeline in Hyrule that exists where, everyone's still kids and alive. Like the Zora's still, little, Zelda's still little, etc. The other Hyrule is the one that Ganon was defeated in, the sages killed, which leaves that Hyrule with the adult Zelda without a Link to defend it, until the timeline provides a new one eventually. Meanwhile, Link has one last fun kick to the groin after all that. At the end of Ocarina of Time, Navi, his fairy companion for the entire game, flies off, never to be seen again. There have been many theories as to why she does this, but the saddest one, and the one I actually believed happened, is this. We know fairies in the Zelda timeline serve one purpose, to aid the hero and be used up. The pink fairies heal Link, but then shrink into nothing and disappear. They die because their purpose is used up. Since Navi's purpose was to help Link on his quest to save Hyrule and stop Ganon, to be his navigator, you see what I did there? Once that quest was complete, her purpose was used up. I think it's most likely Navi knew she was going to die and didn't want to die in front of her friend, so she flew out to die alone somewhere else. This in turn creates the entire plot to my favorite Zelda game of the entire franchise, and one of the darkest ones ever made, which also features the hero of time. I could be detailed with this one like Ocarina of Time, but to keep it very brief, Child Link wanders into the Lost Woods to look for Navi, which turns into this entire adventure where he ends up in a parallel world called Termina, and this story focuses on grief in a post-apocalyptic world with an evil demon mask called Majora, which possesses a child, or a skull kid, for most of the game that is trying to end the world in 3 days by making the moon fall. Link has to help a bunch of dead and lost souls cope with grief on his adventure while spending time with a fairy that isn't Navi and constantly berates him called Tattle. She does eventually get close to Link, but at the end of the day, after Link saved Termina, they part ways. The hero of time has finished another adventure and has ultimately accepted the fact that the last friend he had was gone. Majora's Mask was really just Link coping with Navi's death after all, which is what makes it my favorite game. It's very interesting, weird, and creepy, and the villain of the game isn't even Ganon. It's supernatural and a demon. This game and the Happy Mask Salesman also spawned one of my favorite Zelda quotes and video game quotes of all time. You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you? I don't know how to explain it, but Majora's Mask is a game that feels so wrong that it feels right. It's just very cool and the emotions behind it are realistically written. And after all this stuff has happened and Link eventually returns to Hyrule when the hero of time dies, he is cursed because he never had a successor trained, so he ends up being a ghost in Twilight Princess so he can train the hero of Twilight so he can finally rest. And based on his armor in that game, and the leaves covering it, it seems possible that he was killed in battle and maybe even never found or buried. Very dark stuff. So anyway, because you had to deal with all that, you're Saria. Oh, wait, my bad. I forgot she's dead. Oh, wait, but what about Princess Ruda? Oh, wait, that's right. The one in the adult timeline is dead. I don't know about the child one. Maybe that one's still alive, but, like, does he really want that one? Oh, right, but there's Malone. She's definitely my favorite one, honestly. I like to think that because Twilight Princess takes place in the ranch at the beginning of the game, that maybe the hero of time ended up with Malone. It's a nice thought. I still gotta play Twilight Princess. It's the last one on my list. Oof. Anyway, overall writing for the hero of time is 10 out of 10 for me. Mostly just because I guess he time travels, is a silent protagonist, and is heavily traumatized. But also because him mourning his childhood is a memorable and realistic part of his character many of us can relate to. The music in these franchises is definitely my favorite thing, since a lot of songs can literally be a direct gateway to my memories. I also just love how central the music is to the plot in Ocarina of Time: Majora's Mask. It's very cool. Other Zelda games do this too, but I think these are just the most memorable for me. But yeah, all in all, I love these games and the hero of time. I've always found this lore fun, interesting, deep, and special. And this is just a very simplified summary. If you made it this far, thanks for listening to my senseless yap, and have some rupees. Bye-bye.